Ready.
Oh, no.
What?
No,
Is this
Michael.
Okay, I am joined by one of my favorite people, John Precious Hesse. We were very connected over the last. In this video, we are going to talk and just give our general thoughts about the Army's first phase of rotary wing training, which is referred to as Common Core.
Today, most of the Army's chopper pilots begin their training here at Fort Walters, Texas.
I done crashed my whirly-bird. I done crashed my whirly-bird. And my IP, he got killed. And my IP, he got killed. Oh my goodness, what a thrill.
If they make it, they graduate both as warrant officers and as qualified pilots. But that day seems a long way off when a candidate first begins his pre-flight training.
And it's roughly 5 months long. There's, I think, 5 different sort of sections within Common Core. Quickly, just a disclaimer, we realize that we're new in this gig, and there are plenty of people out there who have thousands of hours and real-world experience with the Army, and so
This is just our take on Common Core. Everything changes. It's the Army. It's constantly adapting.
if you have something constructive, though, and you want to comment about it, please do. Or if you just want to say hello and talk about maybe what color hat you wore or when you went through, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. It's very helpful to everybody that watches these who is maybe aspiring to come fly in the Army or just curious about the branch. So we'd appreciate some interaction.
Absolutely.
So let's kick it off. We started in Wobick. You were a class ahead of me.
Warrant officers are a little different, so a lot of us are coming from prior enlistment, or in Mike's case, prior branch from the Marines. But Wobick is essentially like getting your feet wet into the aviation career. Very few of our peers were crew chiefs, 1 or 2, but even then, everybody else is coming through with little to no experience of aviation. So Wobick is a chance to get your feet wet. It's some what I would consider prerequisites before you begin your actual flight training, which
It's classroom. The vehicle identification portion was cool.
Yep.
I enjoyed that. The other stuff, like very high general level aviation in the Army classes for 3 weeks, and then you go to SEER. Do you have anything to say about SEER?
crickets, brother.
Okay.
That's all I have to say about that.
Best training that I never want to do again. How about
Yeah. So, so there you go. So you get done with SEER. That's kind of the last hurdle before you finally get to flight school and get to start flying. So we'll jump to P1, and I do want to cover this. Something that the Army does, that it's a tradition that it's had for a long time, that it got rid of for a couple decades and has now brought back, is the colored hats for each flight. So John and I were in gold flight, and that happens when you get into ground school. So you're going to start your academics, and you're going to be welcomed in as a flight. And the alumni of previous flights, in our case it was gold flight alumni, they came in and sort of talked about what it meant to them, what flight school was like for them, and whatever. And then you get to don your hat for this phase of flight training. And I'm a sucker for this stuff, and I thought it was cool to be tied to the previous generations from decades ago who wore the same hat, who went through this process, and it just kind of gives you a little more esprit de corps and buy-in my opinion. And I liked it.
It is a really cool tradition. I'm not a fan of the color, but it does help distinguish different classes. Everybody knows kind of where you're at in training, or what. And
it brings your class together a little bit more than it probably would without it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
You get your hat, and then you're going to ground school, and then you start flying.
The student watches how it's done. The strange business of hovering hundreds of pounds of machinery above the ground, hanging on a set of whistling blades. For a hummingbird, it's natural. For a man strapped into a vibrating seat while something that roars and swishes picks him up and holds him, it's an experience. In the jam-packed weeks ahead, there are many more moments the candidate pilot will remember.
Do your nickel ride, which is another aviation tradition.
Yep.
I think it's across aviation, or is it just Army? I don't really know.
I'm not sure. The nickel ride, it's the first day, the first time you are given the controls of the helicopter, in this case a UH-72 Lakota, the EC-45 for the civilian term, and you get a nickel from the year that you were born, and your IP, your instructor pilot, will take you and your stick buddy out, and you'll go, you'll take the bird for a spin, do a few simple maneuvers, and at the end you present your nickel to the IP. There's a story and tradition behind that, long predating helicopters, but pilots bought their own, little box airplanes and would fly around the country, and they would land in people's fields and take them on rides, and yeah, it cost about a nickel to fly. So your first flight might have been in some World War I veterans beat up old biplane, but you paid a nickel to take your first airplane ride.
I had a hard time finding my birth year for the nickel. 1985 aren't as prevalent out there anymore. They're not just floating around. So, do you have any thoughts about your first time on the controls? Or
some people pick it up really quickly, some people don't. I operated a lot of heavy machinery in a past life, so I had not by any means was I any good at it, but I had an idea of this, how the system operates. That being said, I'm by no means wowed my IP. I don't know if anybody goes in and wows their IP, but I went through WOBIC and I went through SEER. I did my ground school, and then I got the aircraft and I did my nickel ride. And I don't remember if I flew first or you flew first, but the first time I got in the controls and my IP just let go of the controls, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm in flight school. I am flying a helicopter. I'm getting goosebumps. It's the coolest thing ever. I mean, it's a long, arduous process to get here. It took me almost 2.5 years before I even got PCS orders of actively trying to get to flight school. And the first time I was given the controls of a helicopter at about 1,000 feet, and he's having me do some small turns and decels and accelerations in the air. I'm like I'm in flight school. Wow.
Okay, you take it. Well, everybody has to start somewhere.
great moment and a long time to get here, so was very, very happy and proud to be doing it. So then you move into actual training. That day is about you're like, this is an aircraft, this is what it's like to be flying it. The next day, which this is kind of a theme that I thought was pretty prevalent in this training, is that there's a lot of kind of learn through doing, or just the second you feel comfortable with one thing, okay, on to the next thing. It was man, I need about another week.
Actually, for most of these hand-picked candidates, it doesn't take long to get the feel of things.
But so it was a lot of just, hey, you're good, next thing, and they just keep you moving forward, learn through doing a little bit. And the IPs, they've kind of seen it all, man. So you're not really scaring them with your lack of ability. They can tell right away where the line is for safety and all that. I think we have a very small box for what's safe, and theirs was quite big.
It's crazy because the first month of P1, each of the phases are about 3 to 4 weeks, depending. And you learn to fly an aircraft in about 3 weeks, and I say learn, that's a loose term. And then, next thing you know, your IP is giving you a left seat familiarization, and then he gets out on the tarmac on the stage field, and he gives you a handshake and says, "All right, go do your thing." And then you and Mike, or me and Mike, are in an aircraft by ourselves, just flying. And yeah.
So that's another. I don't know if other branches do that, but the Army does the solo thing. So those wings on that cap, they give them to you after your solo flight.
It's time to solo. He knows he's ready, or they wouldn't be sending him up alone. But it sure feels different with that other seat empty. That first solo flight is a major step forward, one which deserves and gets the special recognition of his fellow candidates. Having soloed, he now wears wings on his cap.
Anyway, you get the wings. I think it's cool. I'm a sucker for the stuff, and I was happy to get mine. It's another thing you walk around, people are like, "Oh yeah, they did their solo," and you can't wait to get yours. I guess.
You'll see the guy. You'll get your hat, and you'll be walking around like, "Oh, I got my hat," and then you see the guys with the wings, and you're like, "Wow!" And then you get your wings, and you see the guys without the wings, and you're like, "Nerd."
I mean, I didn't. Yeah, mine was more like they'll be here before they even know it.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
It flies
Nerd.
by. Yeah, nerd. It flies. P1 is very. I don't think it's unfair to say it can be a little overwhelming. You've got a lot of things coming at you at one time. Flight school is an individual effort. It's a lot of teamwork, but ultimately it comes down to how well you can operate the systems and how well you can retain the information. And P1 is the introduction to all the information you're going to know: aerodynamics, airspace, a little bit of weather, how to operate the bajillion switches and radios in the helicopter. And so it can be a little overwhelming. Daily questions are
Every day.
Yep. Emergency procedures and limits. Just a lot of information. I felt like I had the least amount of personal time in P1, the beginning of P2, until you kind of get in the groove of things and you figure out your study habits and how you kind of train your mind to memorize things.
Right. P2, I feel like, is basically just P1, except you're doing
Cool things.
cooler maneuvers. Yeah. So you're doing auto rotations, run on landings.
For example, the sudden chilling drop, the first time the instructor cuts power and uses the unpowered whirling blades to bring the chopper down safely in a simulated emergency landing.
Steep approaches to the
Steep
ground.
approaches. Yeah, you're taking everything to the ground rather than taking it to a hover. So just
Slopes.
slope landings. Yeah. So just like building on the foundation that you have. And so you check P2. That's what you do. It's more daily questions, more advanced maneuvers. And then you check P2 and go into instruments.
Yeah.
Basic instruments.
There's a few hard tests in flight school. If I can get through flight school, anybody can get through flight school. And there's a common saying by the IPs that if they had enough bananas, they could teach a monkey how to fly. It's not hard. It's all about personal perseverance and how bad you want it. But basic instruments is a lot of simulator time. It's some pretty crazy hours. We kind of lucked out on our hours, but some people are in the simulator until 8 p.m. and some people are in the simulator at 4:30 a.m. It kind of depends on luck of the draw, but
So I want to cut you off, John. Sorry, man. Say a couple things at this point about, I think this is a good time to kind of highlight this. First of all, the facilities that the Army uses are incredible. Like the simulators that they have are top of the line. I've got friends of mine at other flight schools in the military, we've talked about the simulators and all that. Like, the Army's got some really nice stuff, and it's a privilege to kind of use them and learn in them, I think. You'll hear people's opinions about flight school, like, all the time. And you're going to hear about, like John just said, these tests. Or somebody else is going to say, well, this test was hard for them or whatever. So, like, you're going to get these different opinions from all these different people. So just take everything we're saying and everything everyone else says kind of with a grain of salt. Expect good things and, prepare for the worst but hope for the best. I think two things can be true at once. It can be a grueling experience at times, but I also think, like, it's supposed to be fun. Like, you're supposed to enjoy the nickel ride. You're supposed to laugh with your stick buddy. You guys should be having a little fun here and there. We only do this thing one time in our lives, and I think it's worthwhile to at least have me say you should try to enjoy it, because you're going to hear about going into the simulators, like, you're going to be in the dungeon for the next month or what. Like, I didn't.
It was I had a great time.
I didn't really mind it that much. Like, yeah, would I rather be up in the air flying? For sure. Was it that bad? No. It was like, it's good training, and it gets you FAA cert. Just have some dang fun while you're here. And if you're not here, try to get here because it's worth it. Okay. So then you go to AI. You want to talk about that?
BWS and AI comes first, are probably the two most enjoyable phases of flight school. You're trusted a lot more with making your own decisions, and
It's definitely where you start feeling like a pilot.
yeah, absolutely, because during AI, your IP says, where do you want to go? All right, plan the flight. You do the flight plan. You do all the math that says how much fuel you need. What is your argument for saying that I'm going to go here versus I'm going to go there? Et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, the IP makes a decision, but they give you a lot of leeway with abilities. So you'll fly. We flew to Gulf Shores, Florida. We flew to
Alabama.
Was it Alabama? I thought it was.
Gulf Shores is in Alabama.
Oh, can you edit that part out? No. We flew to Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Edwards.
Jack Edwards. I'm terrible with geometry. Flew to Gulf Shores, Alabama. Flew to Crestview.
Yeah.
Crestview, and all these places. It's like the whole goal is like do your flight training and go land somewhere and get a cool bite to eat. I mean, all these places are, have these little kitchens. You feel like you're in your grandma's kitchen, and they serve you hot food, some of the best food I've ever had. And you're being paid to do it. You're learning a valuable skill. To sit back and enjoy, and it's a time to relax a little bit, actually, because you'll be flying at 5,000 feet for 40 minutes, and you're just flying a straight pattern. And
yeah, it was, and I tell you, it's hot down here. So when they were like, approach was like, hey, we're going to send you up to 5,000. You're like, oh, thank God, man. So you get that cool weather blowing in real quick. It's like having the AC on for a minute, cools you right down.
Yep.
Again, I just come back to, like, two things can be true at once. So you can go fly, be professional, be safe, learn instruments, execute what you got planned, and then also get a good meal and have some fun and enjoy your time out in the day. So go to AI, check AI.
Once he has learned to trust his instrument panel rather than his easily fooled senses, the candidate learns to use that trust. He learns to navigate from point to point by homing on radio beacons. He also learns how to make a ground-controlled approach, GCA, which simply means that you come in for a landing when you can't see the ground, on the basis of instructions given to you by a man on the ground who is tracking you on radar. It takes a bit of learning, but it's worth the effort. This ability is like a ship's life raft. When you need it bad.
Get done, and then you go to basic warfighter skills, which is BWS. And I'd say the theme that I have from there is like, I feel like a helicopter pilot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When you're flying 10 feet above the treetops, you're flying
NOE.
NOE, thank you. Like, 10 feet above a creek and you've got trees above you on either side and you're flying below the tree level and you're flying the aircraft yourself. Like all this leading up to this point, and before you'll blink and you'll be like, dude, I'm flying, 10 feet above the water, doing aerial reconnaissance, or, stopping onto a hover, above this tree so we can send up a spot report. And you don't even think about what you're doing. It's just at this point you forget how long it's taken you to get there and everything you've gone through until you kind of realize that you're doing everything without being told what to do. Not many reminders, just, all right, go over there, and IP's barely on the controls unless you're using your maps to navigate.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say, was there's a lot of planning in BWS, and there's a lot of
Hours.
Yeah, and so you're thinking about the entirety of the flight and the intent of the missions that you're planning for and all that good stuff. So I learned a ton about pilotage and dead reckoning from the air, and how you take
How
your
you can use contour lines to
yeah,
figure out
like
where you are.
just there was a ton of good stuff in there.
He has to learn to fly low and fast and keep track of where he is and where he's going. This takes a lot of practice. Low-level navigation is tough because a copter moving at 70 knots, 50 feet off the ground, uses up landmarks like a jet moving at 1,400 knots, 1,000 feet up. Daily, as the challenges become more difficult, the candidate's ability and confidence grow.
I thought it was a lot of work, but man, I learned a ton. That's BWS. And one thing I would note is you have an instructor pilot all the way from P1 through advanced instruments, and you get a new instructor pilot when you go to BWS.
I will make a comment. You need to have thick skin to come to flight school. You will be told countless times a day how you're not doing what you need to be doing. They're not by any means doing it in a way to put you down or make you feel worse about yourself, but they will readily tell you that you're not up to standard, that you need to work harder, you need to study more, you need to pay more attention to altitude and airspeed, whatever the case may be. Their job is to turn you from not knowing how to fly a helicopter into being a proficient helicopter pilot, and they do a very good job at it. But that being said, you need to have thick skin to come through flight school, and be professional about it. Like Mike was saying, if there's an issue, talk to them professionally about it. If a conflict between people, either squash it or be an adult and suck it up and deal with it.
There you go. So those are the different phases of Common Core at Army Flight School. We, as a flight, had a little ceremony, and I'm just kind of advocating that don't fall into that like AIT mindset where that group of people's walking around like this stinks, man. I'm getting out in 4 years, or like that's a childish mindset. Try to keep it positive. Try to have some fun. Try to soak it up. It's very, very busy, but when you get a moment to take a breath, try to soak it up. We select in a couple weeks. We already know what we're flying because we're guardsmen. We could talk about the Lakota. I don't know about other aircraft to compare it to. Like I crewed the 53.
The Lakota's a fun aircraft.
Man, it's a snappy little aircraft.
I mean, that's coming from somebody that took a ride on a Black Hawk one time and it didn't know anything. But the Lakota, it's fast. It's very nimble.
But compared to listening to the old war stories of the IPs, the Kiowa guys, and what was the 67? I forget the name of the.
Oh, I don't.
God forgive me if you're watching this and you flew.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
That.
Like the other trainer?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
I think it was a Bell TH-67.
I have no idea. They've got like 6 of them dotted around the place.
So forgive me, but from what I understand, the Lakota has like a comically greater amount of power compared to what those guys were dealing with. So
this is a dual turbine.
So you're when you come to fly in the Army, you basically get a Corvette for a trainer. So it's a sick aircraft. So if you're gonna go fly in the Army, like get excited. You get to fly a really nice helicopter as your first aircraft.
I will mention one thing that was glanced over, briefly talked about. It cost a few $100. I think everything all said and done was like $320, as it will certify you. It'll give you a commercial instrument rating, so you'll save yourself $80,000 by doing this test.
Yeah, it gives you the FAA's instrument rating.
Yep.
For a commercial level. So because of the training that we receive here and the facilities and the resources that we get access to. So we're gonna pick up our advanced airframe. We're gonna go to selection, Common Core at Army Flight School. If you're in the trenches trying to get here, stay after it. It
Go
is.
Warrant.
It's worth it, and just keep the faith. I know it's trying at times when you're waiting on answers and stuff like that. It's like, who knows if it's going to happen, if I'm wasting my time, all those thoughts. Everybody's had them who's here. So stay after it. You got something to add, put it in the comments. Personally, I'd love to hear about, your past experience about when you were here. People chime in all the time, say, hey man, I did this in the Army. This was my flight school experience. This was my career experience. Little words of wisdom. I love hearing about it. The people who watch these videos for help, they love reading about that stuff and not just hearing me ramble on about whatever I'm talking about. That's why I've been trying to bring other folks in to talk to them, get different perspectives. It's a shared experience. It can be therapeutic. It's good. So leave a comment, hit the like button if you don't mind, to get the video circulating. So cheesy having to say that.
Hit the like and subscribe.
Yeah. Hey guys, in today's video, John, thanks for talking with me, man.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for
Appreciate
hanging
you.
with me, brother. Keep giving those shoulder massages to our IP so we get good grades. And we'll see you on the next video. Sharp minds, smooth hands.
Above the best, baby.
Above the best.